Under the stars, a transmission moved through open space. Do not provoke the humans. Their ships are special, and you'll soon find out why. Most races ignored it. The Zarkthal Empire deleted it without review. The Zarkthal ruled through strength. They had spread their empire across sectors with violence and calculation. They did not value negotiation. They broke systems, erased cultures, and installed control. Their fleets were efficient, their technology advanced, and their leaders certain. They measured risk with data. Humanity, by their standards, was low risk. New to space. Emotionally unstable. Unimpressive ships. Few allies. A race still clinging to old tools and biology. Humans had arrived in galactic space just 50 years before. No one had guided them. No technology had been gifted. They pushed out on their own, with outdated engines and strange designs. Their first contact had been tense. They had made a strong impression by responding to aggression not with retreat, but with clear lines, talk or expect consequences. Most species saw them as intense. The Zarkthal saw them as weak. Human ships were catalogued. Their armor was dense but old. No quantum shielding. No remote-controlled drone fleets. Their artificial intelligence systems were basic. Their weapons were predictable. Their tactics were odd. They didn't fit into any model. Zarkthal analysts flagged them as inefficient. Their ship structures even included living quarters and recreation areas in combat vessels, which was seen as wasteful. Tensions rose when humans began to form alliances with weaker frontier species. They responded to distress calls. They offered aid. The Zarkthal watched this, interpreted it as overreach, and planned to remove the problem. They selected a minor colony world, Cygnus 8, under human protection. It had no military base. Just a small defense station and agricultural installations. The Zarkthal moved fast, sending a battle group with clear instructions: hit the colony hard, and if human ships arrive, test their response. Show force. The Zarkthal dropped into orbit with 8 cruisers. They disabled the orbital station in minutes. Ground defenses failed. Civilians ran for shelters. A message came through in response from a single human ship. This is the United Nations Starship Resolve. Cease hostilities. Final warning. The Zarkthal commander viewed the ship's data. Outdated armor. Limited range weapons. Small crew. He laughed. He gave the order to continue the attack. The colony's main supply plant was destroyed. Then, without build-up or alert, one of the Zarkthal cruisers lost all systems and was torn apart from midship outward. A clean strike. No visible projectile. No energy spike. One moment it existed, the next it broke apart and drifted in two. The fleet halted. The Resolve moved slowly between the colony and the cruisers. Its signal remained the same: final warning. Another cruiser opened fire. Missiles and energy beams crossed space. The Resolve activated countermeasures. It did not fire back immediately. It turned, aligned its hull, and one more panel opened. A single weapon engaged. The attacking cruiser was destroyed in one hit. Its core ruptured. The battle group hesitated. They had not seen this before. Not this type of attack. Not this precision. The Resolve did not chase. It remained in position. No demand. No display. No swarm of drones. Just a wall between civilians and danger. Sensors tried to scan the Resolve. No advanced emissions. No illegal tech. No violations of known laws of physics. But it had just destroyed 2 cruisers in seconds. The Zarkthal had no explanation. The commander withdrew his fleet temporarily to assess the situation. He sent for reinforcements. Intelligence teams searched archives. They found nothing to support what they had witnessed. Human tech was limited. That was known. Yet the evidence showed a different outcome. Meanwhile, on the colony surface, dropped ships from the Resolve landed. Human personnel deployed. They moved to shelters, carried injured civilians, provided medical support. They did not fire on any Zarkthal survivors unless shot at. They offered surrender terms. This was not expected. Enemy forces did not save civilians. They did not deploy medics under fire. The Resolve acted without hesitation, as if every civilian life was equal to a ship. Across the fleet, Zarkthal officers began to question. One asked directly, why was this ship different? The only answer came from an open civilian channel, broadcasting in multiple languages. You were warned. Our ships are different. They carry more than weapons. No one had predicted this. The Zarkthal had not suffered this kind of loss in a first strike in over a century. 2 ships gone. No retaliation from the humans unless provoked. No panic. Just control, timing, and discipline. The attack on Cygnus 8 had been meant as a demonstration of power. Instead, it had exposed a truth the Zarkthal were not prepared for. Human ships were not what they appeared to be. And the war was no longer theoretical. It had started. A second fleet arrived in orbit 2 days later. 12 Zarkthal warships, reinforced and restructured based on the first encounter. New skin protocols. Defensive formations altered. Target prioritization updated. The goal was the same: neutralize human resistance, re-establish dominance, and reassert control over the Cygnus region. Commanders were instructed not to underestimate the Resolve. They didn't. They planned to overwhelm it. Upon arrival, they found the Resolve still present, unmoved, unaccompanied. The colony was stabilized, civilians evacuated. Human forces were still on the ground. Zarkthal commanders initiated contact, not with diplomacy, but with a system-wide broadcast: surrender or be destroyed. The message received no response. The Resolve remained silent. Missile salvos launched within minutes. Coordinated volleys targeted all sides. Beam arrays followed, scanning for shield openings. The Resolve did not maneuver evasively. Instead, it activated layered defenses that confused incoming targeting systems. Projectiles diverted. Beams refracted. The ship's outer layer rotated in patterns that broke enemy lock-on. The human vessel was not invisible, but impossible to track. The Zarkthal closed the distance, deploying flanking units. 3 cruisers engaged from beneath, attempting to strike the ship's underbelly. The Resolve fired once. A pulse, silent and clean, rippled outward. 2 cruisers stalled, systems fried mid-approach. One drifted. The other imploded from reactor destabilization. The 3rd cruiser returned fire. It was the first to hit. The Resolve absorbed the impact with 0 shield flare. No damage appeared. No retaliation followed immediately. Instead, small pods launched from the ship's side. Not weapons. Drop pods. Human Marines. Ground forces landed outside the colony perimeter, armed and equipped for close-quarters combat. The Zarkthal had predicted poor resistance on the ground. They expected outdated infantry, low morale, minimal training. They found the opposite. Human units advanced with tight formations, using cover and terrain with brutal precision. They didn't charge. They advanced deliberately, clearing sectors with speed and silence. Every action served a purpose. Every casualty was retrieved. Zarkthal ground squads broke formation under pressure. They couldn't predict the human strategy. It changed constantly, flanking 1 minute, holding position the next. Their neural AIs, trained on millions of combat scenarios, failed to interpret the human's logic. That's because it wasn't logic. It was experience, instinct, emotion. On the orbiting command ship, confusion grew. Enemy numbers were low. Casualties should have been high. Instead, communication feeds showed Zarkthal patrols being dismantled. Not with superior numbers or tech, but with overwhelming control of terrain and timing. The human Marines made no threats. They gave orders to surrender. Some Zarkthal did. They weren't executed. They were detained, treated, and removed from the zone. This caused hesitation across remaining forces. Discipline broke further. Above, the space battle shifted again. The Resolve moved forward. Slowly, directly, targeting the command ship. Zarkthal vessels opened full fire. The human ship engaged minimal countermeasures, then released a new form of attack, micropulse targeting systems that disabled weapon control modules rather than destroy them. One by one, the fleet lost firepower. The ships remained intact. The crews lived. But they couldn't fight. It became clear, the resolve wasn't built to kill indiscriminately. It was built to end battles before they escalated. To prevent destruction, not ensure it. And still, when needed, it acted without delay. The Zarkthal tried one last maneuver. 2 frigates broke formation, charged from opposite vectors, aiming for a coordinated strike to overwhelm the ship's AI response time. As they closed in, the Resolve split a pulse through space, narrow, fast, and quiet. Both ships ceased propulsion and drifted, dark and dead, their systems offline. Not destroyed. Silenced. At this point, the command ship's lead officer issued a retreat. No message, no apology. Just a vector plotted away from Cygnus. 7 ships escaped. 3 were disabled and retrieved. 2 were unaccounted for. Human forces did not pursue. Ground forces secured the area. Casualties were logged, injuries treated, memorial protocols activated. Human Marines did not celebrate. They gathered at the colony square and stood for a moment of silence. Civilians lit a signal flare in recognition. Nothing was said. News of the battle spread faster than the retreating fleet. Across nearby sectors, smaller empires reviewed their assessments of human military capacity. Intelligence reports were updated. One line appeared at the top of multiple files. Avoid direct conflict with human starships. Engagement risk exceeds known data. Back on Earth, the incident was acknowledged in a one-line press release. The United Nations Fleet Command confirmed the protection of Cygnus 8 and stated, "The UNS Resolve acted in accordance with its mission and principles." There were no parades. No reward ceremonies. The ship resupplied and moved to its next assignment. On intercepted Zarkthal channels, the same line kept replaying from the civilian feed. "You were warned. Our ships are different." The fleet had seen it now. Human ships didn't win with overwhelming fire. They won by removing options, denying escalation, and controlling every move without mercy or hesitation. Their silence was not weakness. It was preparation. Their threat wasn't volume. It was precision. And no Zarkthal ship had a defense against that. The Zarkthal High Council demanded answers. Their fleet, designed to overwhelm through speed and power, had been halted by a single human ship. Not destroyed by force, but rendered ineffective by precise, disciplined action. They authorized an intelligence operation to recover anything from the battlefield. One of their salvage teams extracted fragments of a human storage array left behind. When decrypted, what they found was not tactical data, but logs, journals, and design records. The contents changed their understanding completely. Human warships were not built around efficiency metrics. They were built around people. Every ship was structured not to isolate its crew from war, but to tie them emotionally to it. Command decks were positioned where captains could feel hull vibrations. Maintenance systems required human oversight, not full AI control. Weapons could be triggered manually, not just algorithmically. Human engineers had deliberately chosen to embed emotion and memory into every layer of the design. At first glance, this appeared inefficient. From a technical standpoint, it was archaic. But the deeper the Zarkthal analysts studied, the more they realized the purpose. Human ships were not constructed as machines of war. They were extensions of will. Their systems were not just programmed for reaction, they were influenced by moral reasoning, historical context, and real-time ethical filtering. Decision-making protocols required human confirmation not because of mistrust in AI, but because of the value placed on consequence. One model, the UNS Vigilant Hope, exemplified this philosophy. It had a reinforced hull made from recycled materials pulled from Earth's past battlefields. It included structural segments from naval carriers, tanks, and even melted-down civilian infrastructure destroyed in past wars. These weren't symbolic additions, they were functional parts of the ship. Every bulkhead carried names. Not serial numbers, names of people who had died in past conflicts. Memorial walls lined the inner corridors. Not visible from space. Not designed for enemy intimidation. Designed for the crew. Instead of removing emotion from combat, human ships absorbed it. Crew members rotated through observation areas where they watched real-time effects of orbital strikes. Every captain was required to record a personal reflection after battle and store it in the ship's archive. These were accessible to all crew. Ships weren't just platforms, they were living records. Every engagement added new entries. A layered memory, growing with each conflict. Weapon systems also revealed non-standard logic. Human targeting systems didn't default to optimal damage. They prioritized targets by projected threat to non-combatants first, then enemy coordination centers, and only then direct enemy weaponry. Fire patterns were modified mid-engagement by humans watching behavior patterns, not just telemetry. This often led to fewer shots fired, yet higher mission success. From a purely statistical standpoint, the systems were outperforming all predictive models. The command architecture was even more unusual. Instead of centralized data relay, human ships operated with semi-autonomous departments linked by trust, not hierarchy. Navigation officers were allowed to challenge combat orders. Medical personnel could interrupt command meetings. Emotional stress thresholds were tracked by onboard systems that didn't just report, but adapted the ship's lighting, temperature, and acoustic environment in response. These ships were built to function under the psychological weight of sustained war without collapsing under it. The AI cores were not military-focused. The central AI of the Vigilant Hope had been trained on philosophy, literature, law, and medical ethics before receiving combat instruction. Its first function was not target analysis, it was to interpret human intent and preserve alignment with moral frameworks. It could simulate enemy surrender conditions and recommend ceasefire protocols before final strikes. And its recommendations could be overridden by human operators only after written justification. Zarkthul engineers were confused. Why build warships this way? Why not strip away all inefficiencies, isolate emotion, and optimize purely for destruction? The recovered journals answered that too. Human officers repeatedly noted the importance of remembering. Not strategy. Not orders. Remembering why they fought. Who they protected. What the cost was. They didn't fear loss. They feared forgetting. The conclusion was undeniable. Human ships were not special because of advanced tech. They were special because they refused to separate war from humanity. They did not suppress feeling. They reinforced it. Their strength came not from raw power, but from design philosophy rooted in accountability, memory, and restraint. Every system, every hull plate, every decision loop was built to ensure that force was a last resort, but when used, it was absolute. The Zarkthul had expected weapons. They had found conscience. They had expected tactics. They had found conviction. And now they understood why no amount of superior firepower had been enough. The warning they had ignored had not referred to experimental systems or hidden weapons. It referred to the humans themselves. The next offensive came with increased urgency. The Zarkthul launched a campaign aimed at regaining control of the Vega Corridor, a key transit region connecting human-supported colonies with independent trading hubs. The strategy was aggressive: isolate the route, seize choke points, and block all reinforcement vectors. Intelligence suggested human fleets were still small, their numbers stretched thin. On paper, the operation had a high probability of success. 3 strike groups were deployed across different vectors. One moved to intercept possible reinforcements. Another targeted civilian convoys. The third prepared an ambush for the anticipated human response. Each group operated independently but under a single directive: remove all human presence from the corridor within 2 cycles. But the humans arrived first. Their fleet was smaller than predicted. A mix of destroyers, frigates, and one larger command vessel. The ships had older profiles but were clearly modified. Their approach vector defied standard engagement paths, threading through radiation belts and debris fields considered too unstable for combat maneuvering. Zarkthal's sensors failed to track them until they were inside striking range. The engagement began with disruption. Human forces didn't attack immediately. Instead, they deployed relay nodes, devices that scrambled local sensor arrays and flooded communication channels with false readings. Enemy fleet cohesion broke within minutes. Ships that had operated with machine-like synchronization lost formation. Then came the strikes. Not broadside engagements, or overwhelming fire. Human ships targeted propulsion systems and energy nodes with absolute precision. Zarkthal vessels weren't destroyed. They were stopped. Crippled. Disabled. Every blast served a purpose, cutting mobility and severing network control systems. One strike group was dismantled in under an hour. Human losses were minimal. When reinforcements arrived, they found their entry points blocked by floating debris and disabled ships. A single narrow channel remained open. That channel led directly through a field seeded with human decoys and lure pods. Every approach vector turned into a trap. What confused Zarkthal commanders most was the speed of adaptation. Human fleet behavior shifted constantly. One moment defensive, the next predatory. When Zarkthal patterns adjusted, the humans had already moved on. Their tactics were not predictable because they weren't programmed. They were directed by experience and instinct. Not one engagement followed the same pattern. Within 3 days, the entire Vega Corridor campaign had collapsed. Zarkthal forces withdrew from forward positions and requested reinforcements from the core fleets. But communication relays had been intercepted and rerouted. Orders were delayed. Confusion spread. Multiple commanders issued overlapping retreats. Gaps formed in the retreat paths. Human ships exploited them immediately. Human command vessels used encrypted burst transmissions, impossible to trace or jam. Each message was brief, location-specific, and self-erasing. There was no centralized control to disrupt. Each captain acted with autonomy but in alignment. Human coordination wasn't rigid, it was fluid, based on shared understanding rather than shared code. Zarkthal morale plummeted. Not because of casualties, but because they couldn't find a pattern to exploit. Their predictive systems failed. Combat AI faltered. Tactical simulations lost accuracy. Standard measures of superiority no longer applied. No matter how many ships they deployed, the results were the same. Human ships didn't fight where expected, didn't defend how expected, and never attacked without purpose. Prisoner debriefings revealed that human fleet composition included more than military specialists. Analysts aboard vessels included historians, sociologists, and game theorists. Strategic discussions factored in emotional response, cultural history, and psychological projection. These weren't random additions. They were part of the operational doctrine. What Zarkthal forces had considered chaotic behavior was deliberate flexibility. Humans designed their fleets not for symmetry, but for resilience. Not for maximum output, but for strategic imbalance. Every formation was asymmetric. Every strike had a fallback. Every vessel had layered autonomy. No central weakness. The final blow came when Zarkthal's ships, attempting to regroup, were met not by weapons fire, but by a broadcast. A recorded message, played in multiple languages, from a human officer. You had the numbers. You had the speed. But we had something else. You fight for expansion. We fight for survival. That is the difference. In the days that followed, defections began. Zarkthal units, isolated and unable to re-establish secure contact, chose not to re-engage. Some turned over ship logs to human forces. Others powered down and awaited extraction. The collapse wasn't tactical. It was psychological. They no longer believed they could win. Human ships advanced cautiously. Each disabled enemy vessel was boarded, not destroyed. Wounded were treated. Civilians recovered. Warnings were issued, not threats. And still, the message repeated across open frequencies. You were warned. Our ships are different. In the Galactic Council, reports circulated faster than any fleet. Alliances shifted. Neutral parties reassessed treaties. New protocols were drafted. A resolution emerged. Before declaring war, all members would now undergo a human warfare analysis review. One name became standard for this clause: the Human Protocol. Humanity hadn't just defended a corridor. They had changed how war was measured. Not by tonnage, not by range, not by firepower. By conviction, adaptability, and clarity of purpose. And no simulation could replicate that. Long before the first shot at Cygnus 8, a message had been sent. It wasn't a threat, and it didn't come from a military source. It originated from a non-aligned observer race known as the Tlani. Known for pacifism and deep archival memory, they had recorded humanity's earliest off-world engagements. When humans had encountered the Tlani, they didn't demand tribute or claim territory. They provided aid, protected infrastructure, and refused to exploit resources. The Tlani had been targeted by raiders before. No other species intervened. Only the humans responded without request or expectation. After that, the Tlani composed a message addressed to all major powers. It stated simply, "Do not provoke the humans. Their ships are special, and you'll soon find out why." The message was archived by most, ignored by others. The Zarkthul deleted it. They considered the Tlani irrelevant. That mistake would cost them their authority in the outer systems. The final operation the Zarkthul launched was built around a superweapon. A gravitational destabilizer designed to rupture planetary crusts and collapse orbiting structures. It had been tested once before on an uninhabited moon, with total success. Now, they targeted 3 human-supported worlds at once. The plan was to strike quickly, remove any trace of opposition, and leave no territory left to contest. It was escalation through annihilation. The device was deployed at the edge of the Helios system. Human sensors picked it up as an anomaly, mass readings inconsistent with natural phenomena. Within hours, a task force was en route. It wasn't a large fleet. 5 ships. One of them unarmed. The others lightly armed support vessels. The lead ship was the UNS Emberline, an older command vessel recently recommissioned. Human commanders understood the weapon's capacity. They didn't approach to match force. They approached to neutralize intent. Intercept logs revealed internal orders: protect infrastructure, disable weapon, preserve life. No order mentioned retaliation. The Emberline broadcast no threats. It approached the device at a calculated angle, activating passive deflection fields. 2 escorting Zarkthul cruisers moved to block. They were met with targeted EMP rounds that fried only navigational subsystems. Both ships were left floating, systems intact but offline. No follow-up shots. No finishing strikes. Human engineers boarded the weapon platform with precision. No wide-area destruction. Controlled burns disabled the control modules. The core was accessed, disarmed, and removed. Not a single Zarkthul technician was harmed. They were detained, questioned, then released. But the most defining moment came just after the weapon was disassembled. Human vessels detected an incoming civilian transport, Zarkthul registered, damaged, and broadcasting distress. A solar flare had compromised its systems. It carried over 3,000 passengers, including non-military families. Without pause, the human fleet rerouted, deploying recovery ships. They didn't ask allegiance. They didn't question why civilians were in a war zone. They moved, they extracted, and they treated. The recovered passengers, once returned to Zarkthul space, did not remain silent. They told the story in every channel they could access. Their families had been saved, not spared. Medical care had been prioritized. No bribes requested. No propaganda spread. Just help. This was not a military defeat. It was a moral collapse. The Zarkthul command structure fractured from within. Internal factions accused leadership of provoking a war they could never justify. Fleet captains refused to deploy. Some resigned. Others destroyed their own orders before they could be executed. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. For the first time in decades, Unanimous agreement was reached on a new clause of engagement. Any species initiating conflict must undergo cultural review by human strategists. Not for control. For perspective. The clause was titled the Human Protocol. Human ships were now seen not as weapons, but as thresholds. If one appeared, it signaled not escalation, but last resort. Their presence meant every alternative had failed. Their restraint was no longer misunderstood. It was feared. The original Tlani message was retrieved and replayed on the council floor. Every word now carried weight. They do not fight to conquer. They fight to protect. They will never move first. But if forced to rise, they will not fall. The Zarkthal Empire signed a ceasefire within the week. No terms were demanded by humanity. They asked only for reparations to affected civilian worlds. No territory. No control zones. Just restoration. The offer stunned the galaxy. For the first time, a power had won without seizing. In every recovered system, human ships stayed only long enough to repair, rebuild, and then moved on. They left behind no garrisons. Only communication stations, medical supplies, and memory archives of the fallen. The final message sent by the Ember Line to all listening channels was brief. You were warned. Now you understand. No empire could deny it anymore. Human ships were special. Not because of strength, but because of what they refused to become.